All right, y'all. Today we got a release of some of the cards that they're calling the Big Score as part of the Thunder Junction set that will be standard legal. So I want to take a couple of look at those and see what we think about them. And to be aware, this is not all of them. This is just kind of what got previewed today. And sorry about the framing on this one. I just couldn't make it look right in kind of short order. But this first one is Esoteric Duplicator. It's two colorless and a blue. It's a clue artifact, which is cool, so you can sacrifice it and draw a card. Whenever you sacrifice this or another artifact, you may pay 2 colorless mana. If you do, at the beginning of your next end step, create a token that's a copy of that artifact. This is pretty strong because if you have anything that has like a big effect for sacrificing it, you now just can do that plus 2 mana and get to do it again because you'll have a copy of that artifact. Or if you sacrifice this and draw a card, then I guess you could pay 2 and have a copy of it. Is that what it sounds like? You do that. Beginner step, create a copy. That's a copy of that artifact. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Sacrificing it. Yeah. All right. This is weird. The only big thing I could think of right off the top of my head is something like Mindslaver, where you sacrifice it and get to take the opponent's next turn. So here you could sacrifice it, pay 2. You could take their next turn, do whatever dastardly stuff you want to do. Dastardly, because it's the Old West. Or, well, yeah, you do that, and then you have a token that you could just do it again at the end of your next turn. So, yeah, that's pretty gross. I don't know how viable that is, but I'm sure there's something really ugly people are going to figure out to do with this. Pest control. This is kind of surprising a card like this wasn't in Strixhaven, where we actually had pest tokens running around. But this is black-white for a sorcery. Destroy all non-land permanents with mana value 1 or less. Cycle it for 2 mana. Yeah, this is kind of a cool sideboard card, right? If you're worried about tokens decks, if you're worried about those Boros Convoke decks that you're seeing running around, yeah, this could be a real nuisance. Like 1 or less is going to get a lot of things. Going to get a whole lot of things. This is actually pretty cool. Not that we need another way to sweep some creatures, because we have several right now to deal with the cheap stuff. But yeah, it is a sorcery answer, but most of those things that sweep the board are sorceries, so that's not a surprise. But also having the upside of being able to cycle this for 2 mana is super good. All right, we have Omen Path Journey, 3 colorless and a green. And I'm assuming from the artwork and some things I've been seeing that Vraska and Jace have now met this new little character that I think has a card, but I haven't seen it yet. And I guess this is going to be the character that gets them to Bloomborough, if I were guessing. So we'll see. But anyway, Omen Path Journey, 3 colorless and a green. It's an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 5 land cards that have different names. Exile them and shuffle. At the beginning of your end step, choose a card at random exiled with Omen Path Journey to put onto the battlefield. This is a wild card. So for 4 mana, you get to put 5 lands aside. You just pick 5 different lands in your deck. They're exiled. Then at the end of turn, you randomly get one of those. So no matter what, it's basically 4 mana to get a land investment over the next 5 turns. Well, actually, this turn and the next 4 turns. Yeah, I don't know if this is good or not. Like, it feels like it can be, but like, this isn't any better than like Battle for Zendikar that just gets you 2 lands immediately and you have access to them the next turn. We got another green card to let you just search for 2 basics and put them directly into play. This does let you get any land, though. And there is something to be said about that, because let's say you're playing this in a desert type deck and you have a bunch of things that trigger from deserts coming into play or whatever else. I don't know what that deck's going to look like, but something along those lines, or even something that just wants guaranteed landfall triggers over the next couple turns. It could be good for something like that. So I think it could be useful. I just don't know exactly where it goes yet, and if it's more superior to having the other cards of its type that can just get you mana ramped faster. All right, Memory Vessel. This has some wild art on it. 3 colorless, red, artifact. You tap it and exile it. Each player exiles the top 7 cards of their library. Until your next turn, players may play cards they exiled this way, and they can't play cards from their hand. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay, so this is a little bit different. This is one of those cards where normally these are in blue, where you get a whole new hand of 7 or whatever. The interesting thing here, though, is you could play it, then use it next turn if you wanted to. That could be kind of sweet. so that way you're the first one to get to use the new 7 cards. It also has the weird possible drawback of not being able to play cards from your hand that exist until the end of the turn after you've had the option of using the other 7. Also, this could be some type of weird tool in a mill type deck because it does exile the opponent's cards, right? So I don't know. This is a cool one. I think people are gonna have fun with this in Commander. There's probably a bunch of different things you could do with it. I don't know where this fits in Standard right offhand. I'm just kind of speculating some wild ideas, but I don't know if any of those would be consistent. But this is a fun card. I don't know what to do with it just yet, but I at least appreciate that it's interesting in its design space. World Walker Helm, 2 colorless and a blue artifact. If you would create one or more artifact tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional map token. Pay a colorless and a blue, tap it, create a token that's a copy of target artifact token you control. Wow, okay. So this is going to make a whole lot of bonus tokens. It does care about artifact tokens, so that's a thing. But anytime you make tokens, you just get a free map. Like, that's not bad. And then if you're not doing anything else, even at instant speed during your opponent's end step, you're like, pay a colorless and a blue and tap it. And if nothing else, you copy a map, right? Like, that's like the basic thing. But you might copy a treasure or a clue or whatever. Blood tokens, whatever else you happen to have. And this is affordable. It's only 3 mana, so I could see this actually doing some stuff. Or here's another interesting thing. If you have, say, equipment or vehicles or anything, and you found a way to copy one of those, well, then now you have a copy of that artifact, and now this can start copying that, whatever that happens to be. So there's probably some fun, interesting design space, so you probably have to work a little bit, but this is another pretty sweet card in what it's trying to do. Well, guess what made its way to Standard? Rest in peace, colorless and a white. Enchantment enters the battlefield, exile all graveyards. If a card or token would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Don't know if we really needed this in Standard. Because here's the thing, like, don't be wrong, I don't love playing against those decks that are just like throwing a bunch of stuff in the graveyard and trying to get it into play. But that's at least a fun design space, right? I get why people like those types of decks. The decks are at least interactive and doing interesting things. I don't know if I like cards that turn those things off, right? Because we have, I don't know what, like 10 decent, I can say, maybe reanimators type spells in the format. Actually, more than that, because white has like 3 or 4, black has probably like 6 or 7 right now. I think there's a random like multicolor one. Actually, there's a couple multicolor ones. Like, yeah, so there's a bunch. But turning all those off to where those decks don't really do anything, that's tough. However, I have a very interesting thought here. This could work with something like Roots because you could just exile all the things from the graveyard and you get all those triggers from all those creatures going at one time, possibly, if you found a way to put a bunch of creatures in the graveyard. So while this is a drawback for some decks that care about the graveyard, this could be a bonus feature, if you will, for some of those types of decks as well. It's interesting. Obviously, this is a decent reprint for older formats, still gets played in different places. Again, I don't know if we need it in Standard, but it is a good card. Well, look who else made their way to Standard. Grand Abolisher. White for a 2/2 human cleric. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Not planeswalkers, note, because this card came out, I believe, either just before or just after they'd made planeswalkers, and it was not a thing yet. So, how do we feel about this card? Honestly, I think it's fine. It is a human, so you can play it in your human deck. It is a cleric, you can play it in your cleric decks. Basically, it says your opponent has to spend their mana on their turn, whether it's to kill a creature, to make sure they're going to be able to counter something, whatever. Because otherwise, they don't get to do anything on your turn, and that's a great thing for you. So yeah, and also notice they can't activate abilities of artifacts or creatures either. So anything that needs to tap to do a thing or spend some mana to do whatever can't do any of that stuff. So this is a really strong card. Kind of interesting that they made a reprint to come back in Standard, but this is a pretty strong card, honestly. There's some meta games where this card is going to be very powerful. Well, this has the word Lotus on it. Let's see how good it is. Lotus Ring, 3 colorless equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+3 and has vigilance, and you can tap it and sacrifice it for 3 mana of any color of any one color. Pay 3 and equip it. This is interesting because check this out. This card itself is also indestructible, which is funny. Kind of like the One Ring. If I'm reading this right, assuming you have a bunch of tokens on the battlefield that aren't summoning sick, you could effectively get all your tokens sacrificed if you have sacrifice triggers. Right? Like you could equip the first time, and then you tap that thing, you sacrifice it for 3 mana. Then you use your 3 mana you have to equip this to the next thing, and then you tap that token to sacrifice it or whatever. So if you manage to build around the idea of sacrificing a bunch of tokens for something, this could be your combo piece in a weird way. I don't know. Just a thought. Kind of a silly thing you could do. But outside of that, it does give something 3/3 in vigilance. That's not nothing. Is this a better probably commander card? Yeah, there's probably some world where you can use both sides of this, just having it as a decent creature and sacrificing stuff for mana. But yeah, it's cool. I don't have a problem. I'm not bothered by it. I don't think it's stellar, but it's one of those very niche things that somebody out there will want, but I don't think enough people. Oh, yeah, the card I was just talking about this guy, little guy was on a card, and they call him Loot, apparently. The key to everything. Green, blue, red. It is a noble beast. That's such a cool combo. Noble beast. Legendary 1/2, so he's very small. Has ward 1. Okay. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of card types among other non-land permanents you control. You may play those cards this turn. All right, so it does say other, so it doesn't count itself as a creature. So non-land types, realistically, you're probably going to have artifact, creature, maybe enchantment. So, I mean, realistically, most decks are probably going to be drawing, or is it even draw? It's just exile the top 2. So, you may be looking at 2 extra cards a turn, sometimes 3. I mean, you can build to get more, but that kind of makes sense. I'm not sure if this fits into a particular deck, though. The only team or color decks I can think of don't particularly care about having access to a bunch of extra cards. It's not really what they're doing right now. In Commander, though, where you can pretty easily set up all the different types, I mean, getting to look at 3 or 4 extra cards a turn when you have all that extra mana and stuff could be kind of sweet. This could be a fun commander for people to play with. Would not be surprised if people are going to build around this, because just having access to all those extra cards is going to be exciting for people. Even more so because they're not in your hand, so it's kind of hard to interact with those outside of like countering. People can't make you discard them or Wheel of Fortune them away or anything. So yeah, really interesting card. I mean, if there's a downside, is that you are technically milling yourself, and if you're not taking advantage of those cards, you're not really getting in a lot of extra value. But that's probably it. It's a neat card, though, overall. Another fun design. Here we have Dust Animus. This is one of the regular ones, not so much from the big score, but it's colorless and a white for a 2/3 flying spirit. Okay, that's already solid. If you control 5 or more untapped lands, Dust Animus enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters and lifelink on it. Wow! And it has plot of 2. This card's cool. All right, so early on, if you just want a 2/3 flyer to fight with, you can have that. But if it's later in the game and you have, I guess, technically 7 lands, because 2 would be tapped for casting this. But if you have 5 or more untapped lands, then you get a 4/5 lifelink flyer for 2 mana. And even better is you can just plot this and set it aside, and then you have access to it later. And that's kind of fun in some cases. Like if you know you're playing against a control type deck, you can play out your other creatures, and then you don't want to commit anything to the board. So, okay, cool, I'll set this aside till later. So if the board gets swept, I at least still minimum have a 2/3 flyer that I could still fight with. But maybe on turn 5, because normally they're going to sweep and either like depopulate or sunfall on turn 4 or 5. So on your turn, when you get to untap, you play your 5th land, and you're like, sweet, I have a 4/5 lifelinker, still ready to fight. So this is actually pretty cool. I like the space this thing occupies. Then we're back to more stuff from the big score sub-theme variant. I don't know what you call that. But this is Legion Extruder. It's a colorless and a red for an artifact. When Legion Extruder enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target. And you can pay 2 and sacrifice another artifact. Create a 3/3 colorless Gotham artifact creature token. I like this. This is cool. Mostly because One, it deals 2 damage to anything, so it's not going to ever just be dead. You can sacrifice another artifact, and it doesn't say artifact creature, non-creature artifact, it's just another artifact. So if you want to sacrifice treasure tokens or whatever, and look like there's going to be several decks that produce treasure, so this could be kind of cool. And then you just start turning your treasure into 3/3s. And it can be used at instant speed. It doesn't even have to be at sorcery speeds. That's even better. So just during your opponent's end step, you're like, all right, you sweep the board, great. I'm going to turn one of my treasure or maps or whatever into a 3/3. I kind of dig what this card's doing. I'm picking up what it's putting down, if you know what I'm saying. Like this card, I could see this getting a little bit of play. This could be fun. Simulacrum synthesizer, 2 colors and a blue. Artifact. When it enters the battlefield, scry 2. Whenever another artifact with mana value 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Well, this obviously already has a home, right? We've seen the decks previously that we were playing the white card that makes the golem, and then you can sacrifice artifacts, and then every time you play one, you make a golem, right? This already fits that type of deck. We have multiple cards that make golems. We have multiple things that care about you having artifacts. This definitely fits a few different piles here. So yeah, this is pretty sweet. Yeah, interesting design, but totally works. And you could have multiple cards now that are making you multiple golems every turn. So, or this could or constructs, but like this could be kind of neat. I like it. Oh wow, okay. Looks like that's all we have for now. I don't like y'all gotta let me know like what you're looking forward to because today's cards were crazy. Like all over the place, high power level, fun stuff to build around. Like Thunder Junction's just looking stacked right now. I don't even know what the first few decks are gonna look like coming out the gate. But yeah, y'all let me know what you think. That's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.